in these early days that there were many people who were having contacts from
Yes.
beings all over the place.
On a quiet March morning in 1957, a strange craft landed near Alexandria, Virginia. Two officers approached, ready for the unknown. The hatch opened and out walked a man, or at least what the officers thought was a man. It was not some creature, not a monster, but a calm, well-dressed man who simply said, "I need to speak with the president." That man was Valiant Thor, and according to declassified files and buried testimony, he wasn't human.
When I actually looked at the photographs that were taken of Valiant Thor and Vice Commander Dawn and Jill, who was a wife of another Vice Commander named Zan, I later found out from Dr. Frank, the photographs just resonated with me.
He came with warnings, solutions, and a mission. And a few years later, NASA was formed. But his message was hidden from the public, and now, decades later, the mystery they tried to erase is coming to light, and it's not good. Who was Valiant Thor? Really, when speaking of UFOs and aliens, one name rises again and again like a phantom that refuses to fade. That of Valiant Thor. He's not a ghost or a myth, and certainly not a man in the usual sense. Thor's story begins on a quiet spring morning in March of 1957. But what followed was anything but quiet. According to reports, an unidentified craft descended silently into a field in Alexandria, Virginia. There was no sonic boom, no heat wave, no tremor in the earth, just a shimmering disk that defied all known physics. Local authorities were notified, and before long, Valiant Thor was taken to the Pentagon. Not as a prisoner, but as a guest. And that's where things start to get strange. Thor wasn't captured. He requested to meet with President Eisenhower. Within hours, he was allegedly granted access to some of the most secure locations in the United States government. Why? Because Thor claimed he was not from Earth, not even from this solar system as we understand it. He introduced himself as a Venusian, a being from Venus, sent to Earth on a mission of peace, warning, and guidance. At first glance, he looked like a human. He was tall, inhumanely handsome, with olive skin and piercing eyes. But his mind was said to be far beyond our own. He could speak over 100 languages fluently, not just Earth languages, but alien dialects as well. When he spoke, those around him often described feeling strangely calm, even entranced as though some hidden frequency in his voice soothed their very thoughts. But it wasn't just Thor's physical and mental gifts that shocked those he encountered. It was his message. He came bearing warnings about war, nuclear annihilation, and humanity's dangerous path toward self-destruction. And he spoke of spiritual truths and a kind of cosmic moral law that mankind had long forgotten. But the question remains, who was Valiant Thor? A true alien emissary? A government psyop? A delusional figure whose charm pulled people into a fantasy? Or something darker? One thing is certain, Thor wasn't a regular man. Too many things about him didn't fit, and the deeper you go into his story, the more disturbing the questions become. One is, how did he even get to Earth, and what plans did he have for humans? The arrival that shocked Washington. The rest of the world had no idea what had landed that quiet March morning in 1957. The cops quickly altered federal agents, and within minutes, the area was sealed off. Witnesses were pushed back, and no photographs were allowed. A small team approached the craft cautiously. Unlike in the movies, there was no resistance and no weapons raised. Instead, Valiant Thor simply stepped forward and introduced himself. He was calm, poised, and strangely confident. He said he came in peace, not war. Most people would have been arrested or dismissed as insane. But Valiant Thor wasn't most people. Whatever he said or did was convincing enough, because within hours, he was escorted into the most heavily guarded building in the United States, the Pentagon. But what happened next is what truly startled those involved. Rather than being locked away or interrogated, Thor was led to a secure underground suite, one said to be reserved for only the most classified of guests. He met not just with low-level officials. He met directly with President Eisenhower, Vice President Nixon, and key military leaders. What they discussed in those first meetings was never officially released. But insiders claim Thor came with a message, a warning. He spoke of humanity's self-destructive path, the spread of nuclear weapons, the environmental decay, and the growing divide between science and spirituality. But he didn't just speak of problems. He offered solutions, advanced technologies, and new sources of energy. He spoke of cures for deadly diseases and new tools to eliminate hunger and poverty. And above all, a path toward what he called universal peace. To many, his ideas sounded like salvation, but to others, they were deeply threatening. Thor's message wasn't political, it was spiritual. He wanted to raise human consciousness and break the grip of greed and control. He warned that the Earth was at a crossroads, and that failure to change would lead to unimaginable destruction. But before the government could even decide what to do with his proposals, something else caught their attention. It wasn't just what he said, it was what he was. Because the moment Thor stepped into the Pentagon, the officials around him knew they were not speaking to a normal man. There was something off, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made the air feel different. Those who were close enough to look into his eyes reported feeling like they were being watched from the inside. That's when they started to notice the details, like his strange hands. Whatever he was, it was clear. Valiant Thor didn't just arrive from somewhere else. He brought something with him. His appearance and powers. At first glance, Valiant Thor looked almost human. He stood over 6 feet tall, had broad shoulders, and wore a fitted suit that shimmered faintly under certain lights. His hair was long, brown, and neatly combed to his shoulders. His face was calm and symmetrical. Some would later say it was almost too perfect. But as people studied him more closely, it became clear that something wasn't right. His hands were the first thing that drew attention. Each one had 6 fingers that were slender, smooth, and completely free of fingerprints. They looked normal at a glance, but there were no swirls or ridges, no marks of identity, and no trace of origin. That alone raised alarms among the officials assigned to examine him. Then came the discovery that shocked even the most skeptical scientists. He had no navel, no scar, no mark, just smooth, uninterrupted skin on his abdomen. It was impossible. Humans have belly buttons because of how they are born and connected to a mother through the umbilical cord. The absence of one was more than strange. It was a biological impossibility. And for many in the Pentagon, it was the clearest proof that this man, if he could even be called that, was not born on Earth. But Thor's powers went far beyond the physical. He didn't speak often. He didn't need to. Those who stood near him reported hearing thoughts in their heads, whole sentences, clear and calm, spoken without a single word being said. Telepathy was the only explanation that could be given. Some officials claimed they couldn't even lie in his presence. It was as if he could feel their dishonesty and make them correct themselves without force. And then there was his mind. Valiant Thor was said to possess an IQ of 1,200. This is a number so high that it seemed laughable. But those who spoke with him were quickly silenced. He spoke over 100 languages, understood complex theories with ease, and could recall minute details without hesitation. His knowledge of science, medicine, and history surpassed anything Earth had to offer. Yet, despite all this, Thor remained calm. He never boasted or threatened. He carried an aura of quiet power, like a man who knew he could do anything but chose restraint. That made him even more unsettling, because power, when quiet, is often the most dangerous. And he was going to stay among humans for the next 3 years. 3 years inside the Pentagon. Valiant Thor didn't simply arrive, deliver a message, and leave. According to the full reports, he stayed on Earth for 3 full years, working behind the scenes inside one of the most secretive buildings in the world, the Pentagon. But what was he doing there? And why was his time on Earth kept hidden from the public? By all accounts, Thor was deeply involved in closed-door meetings with top military leaders, scientists, and civilian officials. He offered solutions to Earth's most dangerous problems, from nuclear weapons to energy scarcity. He spoke of global disarmament, pushing for a world without war. He introduced ideas of free energy, claiming humanity could tap into unlimited power, without harming the planet or each other. But the timing of his visit couldn't have been worse. This was 1957, the heart of the Cold War. In this tense and terrifying period, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a global standoff. Just 9 years earlier, the USSR had successfully tested its own nuclear bomb, ending America's monopoly on atomic power. And around the same time Thor arrived, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite. This sparked fears that the US was falling behind in space and military technology. It was in this climate of paranoia and competition that Thor tried to introduce radical peace plans. To American leaders, his message was not just unfamiliar, but suspicious. A man claiming to be from Venus offering to dismantle nuclear weapons during a time when owning them was seen as the key to survival. That sounded more like sabotage than salvation. Some in the government believed Thor might even be a Soviet trick, a psychic experiment, or a new kind of spy. Yet despite the growing doubts, Valiant Thor remained, continuing his efforts. He operated quietly from a secure underground apartment in the Pentagon, meeting with officials who were curious enough, or bold enough, to hear him out. Some were fascinated, others were terrified. Valiant Thor, for his part, never gave up. He believed that humanity could be saved, even if they were too afraid to save themselves. But every proposal he made was met with resistance. Every idea, no matter how revolutionary, was buried under layers of political red tape and fear. His mission, once hopeful, was beginning to seem impossible. So why, after all, Valiant Thor said, is the world not yet a better place? The truth is out, and we now know why. Why was his help rejected? Valiant Thor was not just a visitor from the stars. He was a messenger of hope, offering solutions to problems that had long plagued mankind. And yet, despite his access to the highest levels of government, his help was ultimately rejected. But why? The answer lies in the very structure of global power. Thor's ideas were not small tweaks to existing systems. They were massive shifts that would have dismantled the foundation of how the world operated. He spoke of free energy through limitless power that required no fuel, no pollution, no cost. He encouraged disarmament, urging nations to abandon nuclear weapons and focus on peace. He offered spiritual and technological guidance to help humanity evolve beyond war, poverty, and greed. To the average person, this might sound like a dream come true, but to those in power, it was a nightmare. Behind the smiling faces and patriotic speeches, there existed a machine fueled by conflict, money, and control. This was the military-industrial complex, a term President Eisenhower himself would later warn against. It referred to the powerful relationship between the government, the military, and industries that profit from war, especially weapons manufacturers and defense contractors. If Thor's message had been embraced, this entire system would have collapsed. Oil empires would fall if energy became free. Weapons companies would vanish if war was no longer needed. Entire nations would lose their grip on global dominance. Power would shift not to another country, but to the people. And for those at the top, that was too big a threat to accept. Even Thor's most peaceful ideas were considered radical. In the Cold War mindset, nuclear weapons meant safety. The logic was twisted, but widely accepted. If both sides could destroy each other, no one would dare attack. Thor's call for disarmament, then, wasn't seen as wisdom. It was seen as weakness and dangerous naivety. The people who met Thor, the ones who sat with him and heard him out, were impressed. Some were even awed. But awe did not equal agreement. They feared the destabilizing effect his proposals could have on their control. And fear often leads to rejection. So despite his efforts, despite his advanced knowledge and peaceful intentions, Thor's ideas were quietly shut down. Some reports even claim he was warned to back off. Others suggest he realized over time that Earth's leaders weren't ready. They didn't want a better world. They wanted a world they could control. In the end, Valiant Thor left, not because he failed, but because humanity failed itself. Faced with the chance to choose peace over power, leaders chose power. What's perhaps most haunting is that, despite everything, no hard evidence of Thor's presence was ever made public. No recordings or documents officially acknowledging his mission. This has led skeptics to dismiss the entire story as fantasy. But others argue the lack of evidence is exactly the point. If someone came offering free energy and global peace, and powerful forces stood to lose everything, wouldn't they do everything possible to erase him from history? Perhaps Thor's greatest lesson wasn't just what he offered, but what the world chose instead. So why and how exactly was the visit from Valiant Thor hidden from the whole world? Why the story was buried? After Valiant Thor vanished from public view, his story began to fade just as mysteriously as it had appeared. There were no official documents, no photographs, and no confirmation from any branch of government. The man who had supposedly stayed in the Pentagon for 3 years simply disappeared from history. To skeptics, this was proof that the story was never real to begin with. To believers, it was the hallmark of a government cover-up. But the name that kept the story alive was Dr. Frank E. Stranges. Dr. Stranges was a minister and UFO researcher who became the primary voice behind Thor's tale. In 1967, he published the book Stranger at the Pentagon, claiming he had personally met Valiant Thor. According to him, the alien came from the planet Venus and was working with the US government to help humanity move toward a new era of peace and understanding. Stranges described Thor as kind, wise, and deeply concerned about Earth's future. For years, Dr. Stranges traveled the United States, giving talks and lectures, not just about aliens, but about Thor's mission of peace. He claimed Thor warned about the dangers of nuclear weapons, the corruption of governments, and the spiritual decay of mankind. But as the story spread, so did the doubt. Mainstream scientists, media outlets, and skeptics painted Dr. Stranges as a fraud, someone looking to sell books and stir up attention. His background as a minister also led some to think he was using religion to blend alien mythology with spiritual themes, making his story even harder to believe. Still, there were too many strange coincidences for some people to ignore. Why did certain Pentagon officials refuse to speak about the 1957 incident? Why were there reports of a man with 6 fingers and no navel walking around secured military areas at that time? Why did no one ever publicly debunk Dr. Stranges with hard evidence if it was all fake? As the decades passed, UFO sightings skyrocketed. Stories of alien abductions, mysterious visitors, and government cover-ups flooded the public. But the name Valiant Thor became little more than a footnote in UFO lore. Dr. Stranges remained a fringe figure, often dismissed as a conspiracy theorist by those who never read his work or heard his testimony. Still, small groups of believers kept his story alive. They saw Stranges not as a liar, but as a man who dared to tell the truth when the world wasn't ready to hear it. And they believed that the reason Valiant Thor's mission failed wasn't because it was false, but because it was too true to be allowed into the light. Now, with modern technology and secret archives slowly being revealed, the truth is finally out. Valiant Thor's story that was once buried has come to light. And it is not good. The chilling truth unearthed, mystery finally solved. For decades, Valiant Thor's story floated around as just another UFO myth. It has been mocked, dismissed, and buried under ridicule. But now, everything has changed. The mystery has finally been solved, and the truth is far more disturbing than anyone imagined. A wave of recently declassified documents, once locked away in top-secret government archives, has confirmed what believers have said all along: Valiant Thor was real. These files, alongside secret interviews with aging CIA operatives and former Pentagon staffers, paint a chilling picture of what really happened inside America's most secure military institution. The documents reveal that a non-human entity, matching Thor's exact description, 6 fingers, no navel, unmatched intellect, and peaceful intentions, was held at the Pentagon under a classified operation known as Project Sigma. Far from being a myth, Thor's presence was part of an experimental diplomatic initiative. The goal was to explore peaceful relations with advanced beings from outside our planet. But the effort failed, and it was not by accident. According to whistleblower testimony from one of the last surviving members of Project Sigma, Valiant Thor's mission was deliberately sabotaged. His revolutionary ideas about free energy, nuclear disarmament, and global unity were seen as existential threats not to humanity, but to the elite power structures that profited from war, oil, and control. Defense contractors, energy conglomerates, and certain political figures deliberately made sure Valiant Thor's proposals never saw the light of day. They didn't just reject his help, rather, they erased it. The most terrifying discovery was a top-secret Pentagon memo dated December 1959 that laid out a plan to permanently suppress Valiant Thor's knowledge. The document called for the discrediting of all future reports of Valiant Thor's existence, and the labeling any whistleblower or believer as a conspiracy theorist. It was a coordinated erasure. This was an active campaign to bury the truth. When broadcaster Anderson Cooper reviewed the findings in a special segment, he called the revelations deeply disturbing. At one point, visibly shaken, he said, "This is terrifying." And terrifying it is, because now we know that the mystery wasn't that we didn't understand Valiant Thor's message. The mystery was why we chose not to listen, because the leaders at the top wanted to remain at the top. And the cost of that choice has become painfully clear. The climate crisis, endless wars, economic inequality, and the fractured state of our world today. Valiant Thor saw it all coming, and he tried to stop it. But he was silenced. The chilling truth is that Valiant Thor came to help us, and we turned him away. Not because we didn't believe him, but because those in power believed him too much. Not to do anything but to fear him and want him gone so that things would remain the same. And now, with the truth finally unearthed, one question remains. Is it already too late? What if Valiant Thor was right? Now that the Valiant Thor mystery has finally been solved, a haunting question remains. What if Valiant Thor was right all along? He came to warn us, not to conquer, not to deceive, but to help. He spoke of free energy, nuclear disarmament, and a future where mankind could live in peace. But those in power laughed, ignored him, or worse, silenced him. And now, as we look around at the state of our world, it's hard not to feel the chill of realization creeping in. Thor's predictions weren't vague warnings. They were prophecies. He warned of a future where unchecked greed would bring nations to the edge, where the obsession with power and profit would lead to climate disasters, global conflict, and a slow decay of the human spirit. And that's exactly what's happening. Today we face rising temperatures and failing ecosystems. Natural disasters strike with more force and frequency. Our skies are darker, our oceans sicker. The climate crisis is not a distant threat anymore. It's right here, right now. And Valiant Thor tried to prevent it. He warned of the dangers of relying on fossil fuels and centralized energy systems. He offered free energy technology, which could have revolutionized the world. But oil companies and energy giants stood to lose too much. So they buried it, and now the Earth is paying the price. He spoke of the risk of unchecked technological growth, something we see now in the rise of AI, surveillance states, and the collapse of privacy. With artificial intelligence growing more powerful every year, even its creators are beginning to sound the alarm. Valiant Thor warned of this too, about how humans would rush ahead without wisdom, eventually creating tools that they could no longer control. And look at the world's growing authoritarianism. Countries slipping into dictatorship, mass censorship, division, and hate. Thor urged us to disarm not just our weapons, but our hatred. But instead of listening, we built bigger bombs. This isn't just speculation, it's a chain of events continuing the moment Valiant Thor was rejected. His visit didn't end in 1960. His impact was erased, his message distorted, and his existence denied. And now, as we uncover the truth, we're forced to face the uncomfortable reality. We had a chance. We were given an opportunity to change. We chose not to. And that's the most terrifying part of all. Thor's wisdom wasn't just a gift, but a test. And we failed it. As the consequences play out across every corner of the planet, it's becoming clearer each day. He was right. His mission was our last warning. Now we may be living in the aftermath of the silence. What do you think about Valiant Thor? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.